Hi, I'm Ted Haptegaber, founder and producer of Live Talks Los Angeles. Thanks for joining us. Since we started over a decade ago, we have brought you hundreds of conversations with storytellers, writers, actors, musicians, humorists, chefs, and thought leaders in business and science. You can watch and hear most of these in our YouTube channel and our podcast. For details, visit livetalksla.org. And now, here's the show you've tuned in to see.
It's always an honor for me when I get to speak to Steve. We became friends when he was first on the talk and for The Beauty of What Remains. And there was an instant connection, and I think I emailed him immediately after we got off set that day and said, "Can I talk to you privately? There's some things I would love to ask you." I'm so excited to be here tonight. So thank you for having me. You're amazing.
Before we get into this at all, Amanda and I were upstairs chatting a little bit about the news business, the entertainment business, and I said something to her privately that I want to say publicly, which is I said, there's no loyalty in that business. That's been my experience, except for you. I told Amanda's parents this. She is what we in the Midwest, because we're from the Midwest, she's what we call good people. Oh. She is. And if there was a female word for mensch, you would be it. But there isn't. Maybe we'll just say it's Amanda. And I really appreciate you and your willingness always to help. And the world's a better place because of how open you've been about your journey through grief and loss. And what it's like to be Elvis's mom, right? And happy third birthday to Elvis.
Well, that's it, guys. Thanks for coming.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now let's get down to business.
All right.
Thank
Okay.
you, Steve. Well, in the spirit of what you just said, we were upstairs chatting, and my first question is going to be from what you just said upstairs. You said, Amanda, this book isn't about death, and I know it isn't. I read it, but yet that hit me. So, what is it about?
It's about alignment. And what I mean by that is if you ask and answer the questions in this book, as I did and as others did, to whom I promised anonymity, you will have an MRI of your life that you can hold up to the light and ask yourself, well, this is what I say my inner truth is. Am I actually living that way? Or is my life mostly kabuki? Am I pretending? Sometimes we feel imposter syndrome for a good reason, because we're pretending. We all feel it to some degree. None of us can always achieve our ideal with our lives, but we rarely really stop and dig deeply into what we believe, what matters, which of course isn't a what at all, it's a who, always. And I've found in my life the unhappiest people I know. I feel a little weird ignoring you guys like this, especially since Betsy and the kids are over there. The unhappiest people I know are people who profess one set of values and live a different set of values. They're not aligned. And it's a very painful way to live, very. The dissonance is just unbearable at times. And conversely, the happiest people I know, I mean, no one's that happy, but, you know, I always say a sad Jew is a happy Jew. So, you know, so I mean, no one's really that happy, but 4,000 years of being kicked around the globe, it's just, but the happiest people I know, or the most content people I know, are people who are mostly aligned, that they're living their truth. So this book is really an opportunity to articulate your truth based on these very, I would say, provocative questions. Some of them seem quite benign until you actually try to answer them. So that's the first thing. It's related to death because every brush with death is actually, unless you're the person who died, every brush we have with death is actually a brush with life, our lives, every time.
Oh, yeah.
Kafka said the meaning of life is that it ends. It's really true, and it's really that simple. And knowing that that's going to happen to all of us, we spend all this time and energy and money on an estate. Well, let's do a test. Who here has a will, an estate plan and a will? Pretty much everyone. We spend all this time and effort and ask all these hard questions about who's going to get what and how much of it and when. Believing that somehow the material will express the emotional. One of the saddest, I was thinking about my dad driving here today, because he'd be really proud, and I know exactly what he would say, because I wrote a speech in high school for the Optimist Club speech contest in St. Louis Park, Minnesota.
What is it,
Of
the
course I
Optimist
did.
Club?
It's like a Rotary Club kind of thing, but it's
Love
called
it.
the Optimist Club,
Love
and they
it.
sponsored a speech contest for high school kids in Minnesota. And I, of course, you know, took a shot at it. And I wrote this speech for the Optimist Club speech contest. I showed it to my dad, and he read it and he said, "It's good, but it's not a winner." That's what he said. And then I won. And so every time I wrote something or gave a sermon that really nailed it, he would come up to me afterward and say, "It was good, but it wasn't a winner." So he would say, you know, I just wish I could call him, "Dad, I'm going to talk to Amanda about this new book that just came out." And he'd say, "It's good, but it's not a winner." In any case, I often say to people that thinking the material will express the emotional is like handing someone you love a picture of food. It won't nourish them, it won't sustain them. One of the saddest memories of the aftermath of my father's death was going down into the basement of my then mother's, my dad had been in a nursing home for 10 years, down into the basement of the townhouse they lived in, and all of my dad's stuff was just in a, it's still hard, it was just in a heap on the basement floor. Nobody wanted it. Goodwill didn't even want it. It's crap. What do our loved ones want? They want our love, they want our blessings, they want our guidance, they want our life lessons. They want to hear us speak to them again and again and again when we're gone. That's what they want.
Yeah.
Not the paperweight collection or the fountain pen collection or, you know, the purses or, well, maybe the purses, but.
The women are like,
exactly.
No,
so the book is for us while we're alive to be aligned or more aligned, and for us to leave something that's really going to matter to our loved ones when we're gone.
Yeah. No, listen, you're so right. Luckily my late husband was a musician and an actor, and I don't have these are words that were already written for him or songs that he sang that were written for him, but there are songs that I have recorded that he wrote. And it's funny, I don't go into the closet and grab his leather jacket and, put it on and wear it around the house. I put his music on so I can hear his voice and I can hear him speak and his inflections. And he did this wonderful show live, and he has all these little bits where he's just talking to the audience, and that's what I treasure, because it's his voice, it's words.
Yes.
And
it's his. I only know one of the songs from your book.
Yeah.
But it's also when you have to distill something down to lyrics for a song, you're engaging in an essentialism that shares your truth. It's like one of the questions in the book is, what do you want your epitaph to be? What do you want on your headstone at the cemetery? Because when you're given only 15 characters per line and 4 lines total, it's the same kind of thing as writing a song. You have to really distill things down to the crystalline essence of your truth.
Yeah. No, I love that part in the book. If you haven't read it, sorry, spoiler alert, but you say something so beautiful about how you go to a cemetery and everyone's like mother, wife, grandmother. It isn't CEO.
Right. Your resume's never there. You're not your kid's GPA, not where you went to college, not your zip code, none of it.
It's about who you were and what you, who you meant something to.
Yes.
That also hit me like a ton of bricks. A lot of this in here hits you that way. Read what I underlined. This is just in the introduction. Just the introduction is like, whew. But it's a beautiful way to start.
Words have heft and weight. They are as concrete and material as anything we will ever own or leave behind. So let us leave words for those we love, in order that we may journey with them long after we are gone. And let it not take imminent death for us to find those words and craft a more meaningful legacy. This book will give you the right questions to ask yourself to find the words that really matter. Perhaps most of all, my message is, don't wait, because none of us ever really knows which conversation might be our last.
Isn't that, I mean.
And you lived that.
Yeah, I did. And Steve gave me, he came on the talk to promote the book, and I said, gosh, if Nick would have only, if I could have had these questions answered by Nick. And I was so depressed about it. And he goes, well, have his family do it. And I was like, what? And you're like, have his family answer these questions as if they were Nick. And so for his 3rd birthday, I wrote to his family and I said, please don't send us a gift. My child needs nothing. Here's his email address that I'm for sure you forgot, because we forget that I, set him up with an email address. And I'm going to send you a list of questions. Please pick at least one and answer them as Nick. And they were like, okay, great, okay. And then I sent them the list of questions. And Leslie, Nick's mother, said to me today, she goes, well, gosh, that was really hard. She was like, those were like, she's like, I haven't even started yet, because I thought the question was going to be, what was his favorite color? Yeah. Yeah. She was like, I didn't realize I was going to sit down. She said, and it was the most beautiful thing. She said, so then Nick's brother called her and said, Mom, did you see the questions? And so she goes, and then we got into an hour conversation about these 2 questions and how Nick would have answered them. And then she said, and then this morning Amanda called me and we started talking, and she said, and it spiraled into this beautiful conversation, which you talk about in your introduction as well, about how the people that you asked to answer these questions, you thought, you were getting a gift.
I
they
thought
got a
everyone
gift.
I asked. So the basic structure of the book is introduction. Then there are 12 chapters. Each one is a question that I ask to help people think deeply about their lives, and then have the material you'll need to write an ethical will. And I invited about 30 other people to also answer these questions. And by the way, an incredibly diverse group of people, young to 80s, all genders, Asian, Indian, Caucasian, African American, Hispanic, people who were famous for good things, people who were famous for terrible things, people who had gone to jail, people whose children had gone to jail, people who were wealthy, and people who changed diapers in a nursing home, change adult diapers for a living. I mean, it was because, and the powerful thing about it is every one of those people I thought was doing me a favor. Would you please do me this favor? And each one of them ended up thanking me. Because we want to tell our story. Mm-hmm. We really do. We all want to tell our story. We all matter. You know, people, what happened with you and Nick's mom and his brother is what I call, when I sit down with a family to prepare them for the funeral, mm-hmm. and prepare myself to write the eulogy, what I tell them is, okay, I'm going to ask you a bunch of questions, and we're going to make a big stew of stories. That's what I call it. We're going to make a big stew of stories for as long as we want. Mm-hmm. And we're going to laugh and we're going to cry. And what happens if you ask the right questions in the right order is a person's life, story, truth, it just blossoms in front of you. It's like watching a flower in time-lapse photography. That's what it's like. In 2 hours, a whole person's entire life just blossoms. Mm-hmm. And they're thorns too, right? And mold and insects. Mm-hmm. No one's life is perfect. When I submitted the proposal for the book, my editor said, how long did it take you to think of these questions in this order? And I said 35 years and 15 minutes, right? And
that was one of my questions.
Yeah, Steve. Sorry. But that was it, because these are the questions I've been asking in this order. I want to say again, the order is very deliberate. And
so why? And
why is it deliberate?
Why is it deliberate? And how did you know? How did you know what the order should be? And
35 years.
35
That's
years.
the 35-year part. For 35 years, well over 1,000 times, I've gathered. Some of you, I've done it for some of you here, many of you here. And people have asked me, like, Steve, how do you do it? How do you meet with families and carry that grief for them and listen to those stories? And my answer, that's the honest truth, okay? The honest truth is, everyone's life is amazing. Everyone's story is incredible if you ask the right questions. Mm. Everyone's life is interesting, everyone. And so the order of the questions, why is that important? Because there's a way I actually begin that is not in the book, because it's antithetical to the book.
When you're meeting a family and you're getting the story?
Yes, okay. Because I start with what would be essentially the obituary, which is actually useless to me, but it gets people talking. So I would say, well, let's start with the easiest things first, just the simple biography. Where was she born and when, and how did she get from here to there? And it's really only just to break the ice because people are so sad and exhausted. Mm-hmm. And then I go into the actual questions, because an obituary, when I think I told you this, I don't remember, but I taught this class in the rabbinical school here for 13 years called homiletics, which is a fancy word for sermons, wedding addresses, and eulogies, like homily. Mm-hmm. And when I got to the eulogy part, the first thing I would write on the board was, An obituary is not a eulogy. An obituary tells you the facts of a person's life. A eulogy tells you the truth of a person's life. The fact that I was born in 1960 in St. Louis Park, Minnesota, and went to Aquila Elementary School tells you nothing.
Right.
But the truth of my life, that the Minnehaha Creek ran through my backyard, and when there was a lot of tension in my household, and when I was afraid, I would go canoeing on the creek, and I've sought refuge in nature ever since. That's the truth of my life. So I really start with the obituary kinds of stuff, the facts, but only to get people ready to talk about the truths. And the first question in the book is, what do you regret? Why do I start with, what do you regret?
You're taking all of my questions.
Oh, sorry, Amanda.
I spent
Please,
last night.
Amanda, please
I was
proceed.
up at midnight going, question number 1. Look at my page.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, ask me.
Well, you just stole my.
Come on.
Why did you start? No, I want to know why you start with regret, because I don't know. I have a very funny thing with regret. I don't know if it's something. I feel like you learn so much from regret that I don't know if I believe in regret. I'm not saying that right, but I'm intrigued.
I think you might be, I can't tell you what you're thinking, but I think it's closer to fail. What you've just described is how most people feel about failure more so than regret. That there's really no failure because their greatest success is rooted in the failure. And so it ultimately doesn't turn into a failure, it turns into something far better. But regret, well, I'll just tell you what I found in the book.
Yeah, tell us.
Because I didn't expect it either. I was where you are.
Yeah.
Until the answers started coming in. I started with regret because to answer what do you regret requires us to kind of crack ourselves open. If you're going to answer truthfully, you have to break yourself open, and you have to be humble.
Yeah.
And truthful.
But can I just ask a question? I can, because I'm leading this conversation.
Yeah. You can do whatever you want.
I think this is why I don't know if I necessarily believe in regret. Because like if I look at a certain circumstance in my life that I could look back and say, gosh, I do regret that. But because of that choice, it led to a path, and that path led me into that way.
Yes.
And I don't regret that path or that way because it was because of that choice. So do I really regret that? No, because it led me into the way that I am. Does anyone agree with me?
Yeah, well, let's say in any case, you've thought pretty deeply just by being asked the question.
Well, that's true, yes.
Right?
Yeah.
But here's what I found. Here was the common denominator.
Okay.
What most people regret most is not something they did. It's something they didn't do.
Yeah.
There are two kinds of sins. There's a sin of commission, the things we do, and there are sins of omission, the things we didn't do, the things we didn't say,
Right.
the time we didn't show up. And, you know, that is what most people regret most. Because the things you're talking about, like I went left instead of right, and you know, we tend to work all of that out in our lifetime. And the things we do that hurt other people, we tend to find a way with time to forgive and be forgiven and to heal with some time. But you can never get back something you didn't do in the moment.
Right.
I often say to people when they come to see me about a regret, I often say to people, I've given up all hope of a better past. It's a very simple, clarifying point of view.
Yeah, I've given up all hope of a better past. You can't change it.
You cannot. And therefore, examining regret is not about the past. It's actually to have a different future. None of us can have a better past. We can't.
Right.
You and I were talking about something upstairs, which I won't share, but I was going to kind of gently say that to you in a way, that none of us can have a better past, but we can. Another reason why the question is first in the book is, it makes it pretty clear at the beginning that examining our lives is really not about the past. It's about the present and the future. And regret is ultimately about the present and the future, or failure. I'll take it either one, I think is the case. But you can't show up when you should have shown up later.
Right. And that was most of the people's...
Most people regret most something they did not do.
Did the people you asked to answer these questions answer all of the questions, or did you give a handful to certain people?
I gave everyone all 12.
Oh, okay.
Some people answered all 12.
Okay.
Some people did not. Some only answered a few. Some were just too personal or difficult. But promising everyone anonymity really helped, and people were generally very, very candid. And what the feedback has been so far that I've received from people who've read the book is they've taken great comfort in the commonality of the human experience. They have this feeling like, wow, I guess I'm not alone in this. I'm not the only one in this. We're all struggling with these meanings. And and people have said, well, this is for old people who are going to die, right? This book. And so I did a podcast that a couple weeks ago that came out a few days ago that reaches a very young demographic.
What is it?
Sarah and Aaron Foster's podcast,
okay.
right?
Yes.
It's like crazy. I had no idea.
The world's first podcast.
Yeah, that's what they call it. Yeah,
It
they have a lot of
was your
attitude.
second time on the podcast,
It was my second
correct?
time on the world's first podcast.
Your first interview was also very good.
Thank you. But their demographic is very young,
Yes.
20s and 30s.
Yeah.
And the degree to which this book has resonated with 20s and 30s shocked me. But then I thought about it a little bit. And I thought, well, who's trying to be aligned? My kids are here. They're in their, Hannah's soon going to be 30. Aaron's 33. Alexa's soon 30, right, Alexa? Yep. I think all of these kids are trying to figure out, what do I want for my life? You're in your 30s. What do I want for my life?
I just turned 40. Steve.
Oh, sorry.
Thanks for reminding me.
You don't look a day over 39.
Thanks.
How do I find my way? What is a meaningful, purposeful life?
Right.
What is nonsense that I've been seduced by my whole childhood to think was important, but it's not important?
Yeah.
And so I was surprised, but when I thought about it, it makes a lot of sense. Who doesn't benefit from asking serious questions about their life?
Right.
We all do.
Well, when I was reading it, I was thinking it'd be interesting to answer these questions now, but then also if you're lucky enough to answer them when you're 60 and then when you're 80, and go back and look at, how your answers have changed, if they have changed, if a happier moment has come, if love means something different to you now. Is there something you regret more now, or
I've written two. One
Really?
when I was 40.
Oh wow.
And one when I was 60.
Oh wow.
So I actually did that, and they are different, and I'm different.
So you thought of this book a long time ago?
Not really. I published my own ethical will in my first book. But the reason I thought of writing this book is, in The Beauty of What Remains, which came out like a year and a half ago, there were 2 paragraphs out of 55,000 words 2 paragraphs about an ethical will. That's it. Mm-hmm. All the non-Jewish talk show hosts, podcasters, journalists, radio, all they wanted to talk about were, 60 words out of 55,000. That's what they all wanted to talk about. Rabbi, I've never heard of this thing called an ethical will. Could you please tell us more about that? Why doesn't everyone do that? Yeah. And I shared that with, Penguin Random House, and they said, well, write it. And that's really how it came about.
Do you have a favorite question amongst the...
I do, actually, because it's one that people don't believe they can answer with words.
What is it?
What is love? What is it? This thing that we all say is indescribable, it can't be articulated. What is love? Mm-hmm. And I love the question because of the answers, which again are each different in their own way, but also identical in their own way, and counterintuitive.
Can I interrupt you for a second? It starts with a quote. All chapters start with a quote. I love the quotes you chose. It's a beautiful quote by, I'm so sorry, I'm going to mispronounce the name. H-A-F-I-Z?
I can't see that.
Hafiz?
Hafiz, yes.
Okay.
Arab poet.
I'm going to read it to you. And still, after all this time, the sun never says to the earth, you owe me. Look what happens with a love like that. It lights the whole sky. Oh. I mean, I feel like that answers what is love.
It does.
I love this chapter. I have love tattooed on my wrist. My name means to love. Did you know?
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I like it.
Little tidbit.
It is the least transactional thing human beings are capable of. And that's why it's so beautiful. Mm-hmm. It is the most unconditional thing humans are capable of, and that's why it's so beautiful. The moon never says to the sun, you owe me, because I reflect your light. Mm-hmm. And so I'm going to get a little Jewy for a second, if that's okay. All right?
Do it. I love it.
Some of you know this. The Hebrew word for, well, let me back up. Quick Hebrew lesson. Every Hebrew word has a 3-letter root. Every one. And if you can figure out what the 3-letter root means, if you know what that means, you can. Everything else is prefix and suffix. You can figure out a lot of Hebrew vocabulary if you just know the root meaning. Okay. We have this in English, like insecticide, fratricide, homicide, suicide. You know, like something's getting offed, right?
Right. It has side, you know.
Yeah, it's not good. Okay, whatever it is, it's not
Stay
good.
away from it.
Right. So this is always true in Hebrew. The Hebrew word for sacrifice is korban. It is the same root as the word for relatives, krovim. To gather in, kiruv. To be close, near, karov. It's all related to this idea of sacrifice. We are closest. Well, let's ask you, let's flip the script. Uh-oh. What are the 2 most important aspects of your life?
Well, what do you mean by aspects?
The most important
like
things or people.
Yeah. My family. I mean, Elvis and my family.
Your family is number 1.
Yeah.
What's number 2?
Oh gosh. That's a good question. I don't know if I have.
Take a minute. Think about it. What matters?
I was supposed to be asking the question. Gosh, like, I mean, that you like really love, that you would like lay down your life for? Number 2?
Or that you've, what what means the most to you, matters the most to you?
Means the most to me. I mean, I don't. Is this a weird answer? Like my religion, like
Your faith.
Faith, yeah.
Okay. Now, what are the two things you've sacrificed the most for in your life?
What are the two most things?
The things you've sacrificed the most for. Your family and your faith, I'm guessing, because you've behaved a certain way because of it.
Yeah.
So what we find is that we're closest to the things we sacrifice the most for.
Right.
But we tend in our culture to think about sacrifice as a negative, as a net loss.
Right.
She made so many terrible sacrifices as a single mom.
Right.
He paid the ultimate sacrifice. He made the ultimate sacrifice, right? We think of it as a negative.
Right.
But in this question, what is love? What I've learned from the answers is it isn't that we sacrifice for someone because we love them. We love them because we sacrifice for them.
Also, do you find that when you are in that ultimate sacrifice, happy is not the right word, but you almost feel like your truest self?
Yes, and because you're a person of faith, and many of us here are, that is also when you're closest to God.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. Oh my gosh.
Because the first law of biology is self-preservation.
Yeah.
It's transactional.
Yeah.
I'll do it if it's good for me.
Right.
But the first law of the Spirit is grasping the oneness in us all. Why would you sacrifice your life for another? I would lay down my life for Betsy and the kids. Why? Because they're one with me. We are one. We're all that. You know, all human beings are 99.8% genetically identical.
Wow.
Identical.
I didn't know that.
And when you feel that, when you privilege that above your own, self and otherness, when you privilege the oneness, that's when you're closest to God.
It's probably why, too, people who aren't religious or aren't spiritual, when they have to face death, oftentimes, I was just talking to a friend yesterday who lost her husband, and she was talking about her best friend, and she said, oddly, he's gotten very spiritual, and it because death makes you question those
all
things.
religions are a response to the fact that we're going to die.
Right.
And some people see that as a negative, like Stephen Hawking said, religion is for people who are afraid of the dark. I mean, that was his view.
Right.
But this is also a guy who was deeply spiritual. So I think what we have is more of a language problem than a God problem.
Right.
Whenever someone says to me, I don't believe in God, I always ask them, that's fine, what do you believe in? And every time they go on to describe something incredibly deep and spiritual that I think of as God. They don't like the word.
Right.
Because when we use the word God in English in America, we sound like evangelical Christians with whom many of us don't agree.
Right.
It doesn't feel right. Like if I got up in the sanctuary and I started the service with brothers and sisters, let us pray. People would think, what the hell's happened to the rabbi?
Wait, don't lie, because that's what I'm used to.
Right? Yeah. But in ours, it's like, he sounds Gentile. What?
What do you say?
Well, wait. Watch this.
Okay.
How many people here went to Jewish summer camp? All right, here we go. Chaverai nevarech. Do you know what Chaverai nevarech means? Brothers and sisters, let us pray.
So we're saying the same thing.
We're saying the same thing, But when we say it in Hebrew, we don't feel like we sound like we're in church.
And if a
Right?
Presbyterian pastor
Right, exactly. And when people of faith, Christians say, use the word God sometimes, they too feel like, I don't want to be associated with other people who use that word, like Islamic terrorists, extremists, or Jewish extremists, right? So, but when you ask someone what do you believe in, they may say, I believe in humanity. Yeah. I believe in nature.
There's something out there.
Right? Yeah. And so they're just uncomfortable with the word. They're not uncomfortable with the idea. We all know, none of us in this room made the sunrise this morning. We all know there's something greater than us at work in the universe. Right. Einstein's, unified field theory was essentially this idea that there is a single unifying principle to all of existence. All of it. It's all motivated and energized and sustained through a single powerful source. For him, it could be discovered in physics. For me, in nature and in that room, what is on the dome of that room? The Shema. All is one. It's the unified field theory. Einstein just didn't know it. Right. Almost every deep spiritual idea any of us have, no matter what word we use for it, it's in the Bible. People just don't know it. And I'm okay with that. Because everyone is a spiritual being. Everyone.
When I thought about that question, what is love? I think it's, I don't know if there's another feeling that is so wonderful and then also so horrible.
Yeah. There's a duality. Yes,
like,
that's why memory is so beautiful and painful. Yeah. Right?
Yes,
it's both. There's a duality to memory. Yeah, rabbis, I don't know about pastors and ministers, but rabbis are full of platitudes about memory. May his memory be a blessing. She'll live on in your memories. Well, that's all true and beautiful, but it's also true that memory really, really hurts. Yeah. It's like, being like slapped and kissed at the same time. Yeah. It's both, and love can be that way. Yes.
Yeah. Oh, and I'm so nostalgic. I'll do things that I know will cause
hurt.
me pain.
Will hurt.
Just because of the memory of it.
Yes. Yeah. And it's worth it.
Yeah.
It is.
I guess.
Well, it is, or you wouldn't. It is,
I guess,
It is, or you wouldn't do it.
Right.
And it's. I think that coming to terms with the duality, that it will always be a duality, it can never be resolved, is its own resolution. Making peace with the fact that these two emotions will never, ever be anything other than at war with each other is its own armistice, its own peace treaty. Right. And that's the best I think we can do. Yeah. Making peace with the fact that when you consciously connect or even stumble on a connection to Nick, that it's going to be beautiful and exquisite and sharp and painful. Yeah. Knowing that and making peace with that is healing. Yeah. And it's the truth. Yeah.
So many people have said to me, and if anyone in this room has lost somebody, grief is love, and it's so true. It's why it hurts so much.
But sometimes it's love obstructed. It's like you can't.
You're right.
Like the sun can be obstructed by the moon in an eclipse. The moon isn't stronger than the sun, but there are moments when it is.
Right. Okay, hold on. Oh, one of my favorite is the advice one. People love to give, advice. But I loved it. I love reading this chapter. It's a great one to kind of always go back to. I love a positive quote. So I felt like this chapter just will supply a month of positive quotes for me. It's one positive quote after the other.
Yeah.
Why did you include that question?
Well,
So subjective.
the objective for including a question about what is good advice is we all have boiled down our accrued wisdom to some pithy saying, right? My kids who are here accuse me all the time of, okay, you just sum it up. Like, okay, Dad, do you have to just sum everything up with a whatever? And that's how I was raised. My dad was not well educated. He really didn't go to high school more than half a day because he went to work at noon. But my mom and dad graduated high school, but they were married at 17 and 18. They had 5 kids before they were 30.
Wow.
They weren't well educated, but my dad was really smart. He had incredible instincts. He had an amazing bullshit meter. You could not bullshit my dad. You just couldn't, And he was a professor of sorts, but the way he taught was with Yiddish sayings. I grew up being instructed with Yiddish sayings. If I had to make a choice, he'd say, well, you can't sit in 2 chairs with 1 tuchus. Stuff like that. Like, that's the way he just,
He's right.
Right?
He's right.
That's like, and I do the same, and I think we all do it to some degree, and it's really helpful because it's a nice little like day pack you can take with you through life of good advice distilled down. I like things I always loved haiku as poetry. I love things that are distilled down because, and I think I write this way too.
Yeah.
I try to write and really get down to the granular particulars of something because kind of like in science, they're always coming up with a new smallest particle. It was a quark and then it was a Z particle and now there's another one, I can't remember the name of it. What you're doing when you magnify and get down to the tiniest particle, you're doing something else. You're revealing something so particular, but also what is a universal part of all matter.
Yeah.
So the more particular something is, the more universal it is. Right. Blake said, in a drop of water, you can see the ocean, right? And so these sayings, many of them are just hilarious. Yeah. And some of them, my favorite is from a friend of mine who did this, who's a bankruptcy attorney. And I asked him once, I said, can you just tell me what you do? Like, what is bankruptcy law really? What do you do? And he said, simple. My field of law basically goes like this. What starts out fucked up usually ends up fucked up. And that's bankruptcy law, apparently. Right? So I love things like that because they're funny, they're true, they're helpful, they're easy to remember.
Right.
So,
you know what though? I think that's why your books are so helpful to people grieving, because I think, and this is just me speaking from my situation, you get to a point where there's no bullshit factor. Like you're just like, stop bullshitting me. Like it's just like, just give me the truth. I just want the truth. I just want the honesty. I just need something that is simple and concrete and helpful. And I don't want frills and fluff. I just want the truth. Yeah. And I remember I after Nick passed, it was really hard for me to read any books on grief, and you can imagine the pile you get when you are a widow. Yeah. It's like, I don't know why people think you have that much time. But, and if you do, you'd want to pick up a book about death.
I think, I'll tell you, I think people do it because it's easier than showing up.
Yeah, you're right. Absolutely. And people don't know what to do. Yeah. And I'm not putting it down because
I'll put it down. Listen, this is for everyone here. A book alone is cowardly. It's cowardly. Yeah. You got to walk in that front door. Yeah. You got to.
Well,
but in any case.
In any case, when I read The Beauty of What Remains after we had you on the talk, or I think it was right before we had you on the talk because we were having you on the talk, I was like, oh my gosh, thank you for this honesty. And the chapter that hit me the most was when you were talking about your friend that wanted to put down, and you had to put down your rabbi hat,
yes,
and just put on the
yes,
Steve Leder hat.
Tara.
And that honesty in the moment, because I think as a religious person, you always question, the mind of your pastor, your priest, or your rabbi, and I just was so thankful for your honesty in those couple of paragraphs. I was like, I can trust this guy, and it was so powerful. And I think that's why your books make such an impact. I know they've made such an impact because I now gift them, taking my own advice.
Oops.
Whoops. No,
I didn't mean that in a bad way.
No, because I know that they actually are really helpful, and because I can say, no, this guy's my friend. He knows what he's talking about. Okay, well, we're done chatting. We have to open it up to this lovely audience that please don't be shy in asking questions, because
we're here.
We're here, and it's not too often that you get this guy in a suit. Yes, go ahead.
Thanks for sharing your story with
Thanks.
so many of us, because we've lost 1 million Americans, and like your story is one that for those who didn't lose someone close to us, I think we felt for you and for your family with what you were going through.
Thank you.
And I'm just curious, as you both think about COVID, now that we're somewhere near the backside of COVID, what are your hopes for how that changes how people approach life and revalue the things that they think are important, or perhaps that they felt were important before COVID? Because I think all of us hope maybe something good could come of this in the long run.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering how you both think about that.
It's part of why I wanted to get this book done. People have said, oh, another one so fast, how'd you do it? I wanted to do it quickly because we are all ideally in a rare time in our country when we are reevaluating our lives. We're reevaluating our lives. Because COVID was one of those sort of exercises in essentialism. And we're asking ourselves these questions. Do I really want to live this way? Do I really want to work this way? Do I really want to keep spending an hour or two a day in my car to go have breakfast, lunch, and dinner with people I don't really like? Do I really want to be withholding my expressions of love? Like I say I love you now. I don't think I was a cold, withholding person before COVID, but during COVID and now, I'm like, I love you. I really love you. I love you. I love you. I love you so much. And I'm just saying it. I always felt it, but I'm saying it now. And I often say, if you have to go through hell, don't come out empty-handed. And that's really your question. Like, was it worth 1 million people dying?
No.
Was it worth one? Because it's not 1 million people who died. It's one person who died 1 million times. And that's a lot of pain. And if we come out of this hell empty-handed, shame on us.
Yeah.
What do I hope changes? I hope, I can only answer generally, but I think we'll all know what this means in our own lives. I hope we don't go back to our default settings. I can only tell you from me what that means. And it is related to death. It's also partly because of my father's death. Like I don't want to wear uncomfortable clothes anymore. I don't want to have breakfast, lunch, and dinner with people just because they say, hey, let's have lunch. It'd be great to catch up. I don't want to get into my car to be pissed off on the 405 and the 10, or Sepulveda, or Olympic, or Pico, or Sunset, or Santa Monica Boulevard, to do something I could just as easily and respectfully do on Zoom. I don't want to pretend anymore. I just don't want to pretend anymore about anything. And I want to keep having dinner at home. I want to keep the kids close. I mean, like Aaron, he was with us for dinner for almost 2 years. It was so beautiful. It really was. Yeah, he'll be back tonight too. But and Hannah was over all the time. And Alexa and Aaron were around all the time, and it's really who we have, not what we have, that matters. And I think COVID taught us that. And I really hope we don't revert back to our default settings, because the seduction is there. It's definitely there. I mean, you can already see the buying and shopping that's going on. It's absurd. So that's, for me, more authenticity, more I love yous, more dinners around the table at home, less time pissed off in traffic. So for me, those are, they might not sound like much, but for me, that's a lot. That's a lot for me.
Yeah, I mean, I would just obviously agree with all of that. I think for me it was like, if I'm taking my whole situation out of it, obviously, because COVID hit me in the worst of ways. Ironically, though, I said this to my sister not too long ago. It's like we went through the worst time of my life, and yet sometimes I find myself missing those days. Because of that, being with my family every night and really just uniting in like the most simplest of ways, and not caring about anything that isn't actually important. And that has forever changed me. And I think my hope is for all the families that have lost somebody like myself to this horrible virus, that enough of those people will live their life to affect other people, so that that chain reaction, can keep people moving in that direction, right? Because it hurts my heart when I hear people talk about COVID in a frivolous way, but that's because it didn't affect them, and that's really hard to, be by somebody and hear what they say about,
Do you engage when someone does that?
Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. Because also COVID made me I'm not an angry person, but it made me a lot less combative, because I just felt like I don't need to win this argument.
Doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter, yes. In fact, my sister and I were in a fight recently, and I said, well, I that hurt my feelings. Why didn't you tell me? I said, because it doesn't matter, really. I will tell you when something hurts my feelings and it matters, but that doesn't matter. I can get over that. I don't need to hash that out with you, because then that's just going to cause a fight that actually doesn't mean anything, and I know better than that, so I just don't even bring it up, because it's a frivolous fight over a frivolous matter, and it's not important.
Yeah.
And she was like, but I want to know if I've hurt your feelings. And I'm like, when you really hurt my feelings, I'll tell you. And I think that's because of everything I went through.
Yeah.
I probably in the past would have been like, you know what, that really hurt my feelings, and I'm mad at you. It's not important now. But I think the other thing that was a beautiful thing that I hope that we remember, which you also said, is that I think the pandemic for the first time put literally everyone in the world on the same playing field. Everybody. We were all on the same playing field, which is what you've so beautifully said about how we really are one. We're, what did you say, 99.8% the same
Genetically
person.
identical, yes. And I think what it also did is it pierced everyone's sense of invulnerability.
Yeah.
We were all awakened to our vulnerability.
Yeah.
And we spend a lot of time, sometimes appropriately so, subordinating that feeling.
Yeah, and craving just honesty and realness, which is, I think, such a beautiful way to live your life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyone else?
Any more questions?
Yeah, go ahead. Oh, sorry.
Hi, thank you for sharing your grief and your pain, but I want to know how your little boy is. I've been a teacher for 30 years, preschool through fourth, and I know what joy that can bring. We had 2 new kids born when my dad was dying of cancer, and I know that brings such joy. So I hope you have those moments every day, so it brings you joy when you're feeling all that pain.
Oh, every day, every day. Elvis, he just turned 3, and he was just turned a year when Nick passed away. I have, since Nick died, filled his life with anything and everything I can. A lot of Nick's music, and which is one of the most beautiful things is, if we're in the car and it's, something's on and it's Nick singing, I'll go, who's singing this? Dada. Dada is, and he'll talk about Nick like he's still here. So that it's beautiful. I know there's a lot to come that I have no idea even how to, there's no way to even prepare for it, because I know he'll have lots of questions. I said to his family today, because his family and I FaceTime every Sunday morning, and I said to them, because about these questions, I said, you guys, you knew Nick for 40 years. I knew Nick for 5. I said, Elvis is going to grow up and he's going to ask me a lot of questions about his dad that I will not know the answer to, because I didn't know him that way. You have to answer these questions because you knew him that way. And he's going to want answers, and I can only provide so much. So, I think in raising him, there's a lot that I worry about, but I was raised in love. I raised that little boy in love, and I just hope that, that always shines through. But he's doing so great. He has so much of his father in him, and he's a joy. I don't know what I would do without him. I know I truly would be lost. Yeah, very, very lucky that I have that piece of Nick. Yeah, John.
We have time for 2 more questions.
Hi. First, I have to say I'm a Latino passionate Jewish man.
I love that.
For the last year, I work at a cemetery. People come to me not because they know me, because they come to me because they have to come to me. And I'm always thinking, and I'm always trying to communicate the best way with these people that are grieving for different reasons. Losing parents, losing young kids to suicides lately, a lot of different reasons for dying. I had a terrible conflict with death, and this last year, since I've been working this cemetery, has helped me a lot. I even invited my wife. I have told her several times, let's go for a picnic. I want you to come and picnic, because you'll see how peaceful it is.
Harold and Maude.
Says, honey, you might be solving it, but not me, so you could go by yourself. Anyway, but what I wanted to ask you is, when I talk to these people, as much as I want to be empathetic, and as much as I want to be, honest, and as much as I try to communicate with these people, a lot of times I'm thinking in my mind, these people are grieving, and they come to me, and it puts them in another world that I am. They're the grievers. How do they think, you as a griever, how do you think when you talk to people that are not really grieving and are talking to you and are being perceptive to what you're going through, even in the most sensitive way, that they belong to your world? Is that something that you accept? Is that something that I don't know if you understand what I mean.
Well, let me try to answer, and then tell me if I've understood or not understood. Because I think what I'll say is that as a grieving person, you find yourself going to people that you would never go to before. It's very strange. You think you would run to your best friend or your mom or, you know, your whoever, and you find yourself going to that new neighbor that you barely know, or your friend from 20 years ago who ended up just calling you, or the man that is at the cemetery who just has a wonderful presence and feels safe. And I can't explain it. It's and oftentimes, and this is advice I'll sometimes give to people, if you have somebody that's grieving in your life and they aren't coming to you, don't get upset with them. Be gracious and just accept that you're not the vessel for them right now. You might be one day, but right now they can't, for some reason, open up to you. Don't take it personal. It's not personal. But I would just say that it's a hard task, because grievers aren't always the happiest of people. So you're probably surrounded by a lot of tears and people needing love and support and kindness and empathy. But you must be doing something right, because you keep receiving, you know, that person. You know, you must have something welcoming to you. Does that make sense? Did I answer? Yeah? Did
I also wanted to say that I read your first book, I have read the second one, and I said that I was a passionate Latino, and I always enjoyed life very much. Because when I'm hurting, I try to enjoy. But this year that I've been in so much contact with death is the year that I felt the most alive in my whole life.
Yes.
It's
Yes.
incredible. I mean, and not in a way, you know, because I'm a type A personality, and but you know, in the most, I mean, I really feel alive inside, which is something very, very weird.
not weird at all.
It doesn't seem weird to us. You know, it's what we started with, which is when every brush with death is a brush with life, and gratitude.
That's what you say in your first.
Yes. And, you know, I would just say for you, because you and I have similar roles sometimes, just show up and be real, be authentic. People don't need some bad acting job when they're suffering. They need you. Just be you, and you know how to do that. We all do. I get calls all the time. Steve, I'm going to see, you know, my friend who was just diagnosed, and he's got 3 months to 6 months, and I'm going back east. And what do I say? Tell me what to say. And the answer is show up, and be real, be authentic, because that's what they need. And that's what all of us need and want. Anything else is frightening, really.
Right.
So, and thank you for the work you do.
Yeah.
You know, and I know what you mean. People call me after, you know, sometimes I get phone calls. In my life, it's like driving a stick shift. I'm constantly, you know, baby naming, to the funeral, to the wedding, to a marketing meeting or a budget meeting or whatever, you know, it's just, and I often, like, as soon as I leave the cemetery, start running calls, and someone will say, where are you? I say, oh, I'm just leaving Hillside. And people go, oh, I'm sorry. I said, anytime I'm driving myself to or from the cemetery, it's a good day.
That could be
Right.
an answer for advice.
Yeah, right? And I really feel that way. It's like, it's better than being in the back, right? Right? If you know what I mean. Anyway, one more question.
Dr. John, save us.
Say that, because I might be the bummer in this.
Uh-oh.
I'm a physician by training. I've dealt a lot with death and and dying people. Is this working?
Get close to them.
And I think on an individual case basis, we all empathize. We feel we want to make people feel better and everything else. But I think we also, as human beings in the world, we need to keep this in perspective. We had a pandemic, which historically, we look at pandemics in medicine that happen every 100 years that wipe out 1/3 of the world's population. And what's going on now in Ukraine and what's expanding there, I look at, I'm kind of more affected by, the individual case matters to Amanda, to her family, to her,
Right.
her small nucleus of people, but us as a community of the world, what's going on, and by the way, the pandemic is not over, hardly. How do we deal with that more, you know, and that kind of grief that we see? Because what I see that's happening in the Ukraine, that
I understand the question.
The Holocaust.
Yes.
It's like the whole
Yeah.
thing
Yep.
coming all over again. and
Yep,
that
I understand the
great loss.
question. Look, I've been asked this a lot since in Texas. You know, like, what do we do? What can we do? The truth is, there are 400 million guns in America, and I've given up all hope of a better past. They're out there. And somebody, you know, who isn't a politician can say that. This is an intractable issue. And there are many. Putin is an intractable issue. Betsy and I were at a dinner years ago, I mean a decade ago, and Tony Blair was there. And he was asked more than a decade ago at that dinner, it was a small dinner, so he was being honest, what do we do about Putin? And 10 years ago he said the time to deal with Putin was 15 years ago.
Same as Winston Churchill with him?
Yeah, okay, so here's where I go in my head. I can only tell you, John, what helps me. There is a similar Hebrew saying in the Talmud, but I'm going to use a Buddhist saying, which I find really helpful, which is, tend the part of the garden you can reach. That's it. And that's a lot. Just, we can all tend a little bit of the garden of the world that we can reach. Some of us have longer arms. Some of us have bigger platforms. But we all have a part of the garden we can reach. Tend it. Make it more beautiful. Root out meanness and othering and objectification and violence. Raise the best kids and grandchildren you can if you're lucky to have them. Be the best friend you can be. Visit people who are suffering. Show up for people. Say yes, right? Say
Good answer.
yes, say yes. Just tend, you know, Jews use this phrase tikkun olam all the time. It means to repair the world. I think it's a very foolish idea because you cannot repair the world. It's not possible. Can you repair the dysfunction in your family? Maybe. Can you repair your neighborhood? You know, we have the car center. It's not tikkun olam. It's not repairing the world. It's tikkun Koreatown. That's what we're doing. And that's a lot. So I think we all just have to think about that little part of life that we can make more beautiful and less ugly. And that's a lot. That's a lot. Mm-hmm. So I know we have to close, but I want to say something about Amanda's book, if you don't mind. And it's going to be a movie, right? Do we know when the movie's coming out?
Oh gosh, well, we just turned in the first draft of the screenplay, so it's got a ways to go, I'm sure.
It is a beautiful book because it's honest and real, and because it makes the point that I was making earlier when I said 1 million people didn't die. One person died 1 million times. And you really feel that in your book, and you feel the power of your family and your faith. And it's a beautiful book. I'm sure it's going to be a beautiful movie. And we're all grateful to you. And I'm personally grateful to you because of your willingness you know, to be really who you are. And that takes a lot of courage in your business. So thank you. You're a good friend. Thank you.
You're a good